Welcome back to the Webby O'Neill channel. We have plenty to talk about, and with us is Laurie Whitwell from The Athletic. Very good friend of mine. Been to the matches with his dad, grown up with this lad, but I have a bone to pick with him. He's not been back for about nearly 2 years. So, Laurie, you've been away, and we've got a lot to catch up here. So, it's good, great to have you back. And I'm going to dive straight into it. Erik ten Hag, if he's here next year, what influence will Erik ten Hag have on transfers?
I think he will have a reduction of his influence personally, because he's been very involved in the 2 years that he's been at the club so far. INEOS have a slightly different way of working. You can look at Nice for how they've approached that in Ligue 1. And they've got a sporting director that has, a lot of power, and then a head coach that works under him. And yeah, the head coach is absolutely consulted and he's part of the process, but the final decision rests really with the sporting director and then perhaps other recruitment staff. So, in the first 2 years of United's of his tenure at United, Ten Hag has had quite a big say. I would argue. Certainly, it's not been the case that he has got every player that he's wanted. Look at Harry Kane, for example. It's certainly not been the case that he is, picking every single player. You could perhaps look at Rasmus Højlund for that. I think he wanted Højlund ultimately, but it was a player that was brought to him sort of by the recruitment department. But that being said, he has got to grips with a lot of the signings. He's been personally involved, in terms of trying to persuade the players or just getting a sense of their character. Certainly with Højlund, he knew all about what his mentality was like before signing him through talks with him. I think INEOS will approach it slightly differently. They want to have a kind of comprehensive scouting network and recruitment system. That's the idea at United now, but I don't think in practice it's working like that. So, they have their own people in mind. They're already making changes. We'll sort of see what will come in the months to come once the ratification is official. And then I think we'll get a better idea as to exactly how they work. But I do feel like the manager's influence on signings will just be reduced slightly.
You've written many articles about INEOS at Nice and what they do, especially when you look at how many managers they've had. And you might not want to answer this directly, but it does seem that they employ different managers. Are you worried, or do you think that could happen here?
I think it is different environments, right? Like, so you've got Nice, a club that hasn't been, winning titles, massively historically. So they're trying to perhaps do something different to get them up there, challenging, and they're having a good season this year, second in Ligue 1 to PSG, and PSG win every year, and have got much more funds than Nice. So I think they are respectful of the history of United and understand that, the successful times have been when they've had a manager in place for a considerable length of time. Obviously, you look at Sir Matt Busby and Sir Alex Ferguson. They obviously, I think, probably made mistakes at times at Nice. Certainly the previous season that they, the signings that they made didn't really fit into what they were trying to do. They had to, change everything. I think chief executive, sporting director, head coach were all changed. It seems like maybe they've got a better grip of it now, given how they're doing. And as you say, sort of going for a younger profile of player, I do wonder if that's what they'll go for at United. Clearly, you can't just buy a load of kids because it's a big pressure playing for United. It's difficult to exactly project how a player is going to turn out in time. So I think they will have to buy some established players as they go on. But that being said, I think they will want to be smarter in the transfer market than United have been, in my opinion, in terms of the prices that they pay for players. They want to be able to strike at the right moments and get good value for certain players. Clearly, they'll have to spend decent money on players at times because, quality costs. But I think they'll want to take a different approach than what's been going on in the last few years.
Who do you see United appointing as a sporting director? Omar Barada's role seems to be massive. So if you can explain how you see that going, and also how a sporting director and who it's going to be.
Yeah, the Omar Barada one was a real surprise.
Yeah, it was.
I'd heard about him, through the football industry. You hear sort of good things about him usually in terms of being able to make a deal. But for United to go and appoint him as chief executive was a stunner for me, because INEOS had kind of come in football operations, and it was always this question: would they have oversight of the chief executive role as well? Richard Arnold leaving had, I think, a lot to do with INEOS's introduction, but also a lot to do with his relationship with Joel Glazer. And, effectively, I think he felt that, listen, I'm going to step away from this now at this point. Patrick Stewart, the general counsel at United, appointed as an interim chief executive. INEOS clearly have had a lot of influence, though, in this appointment. So Dave Brailsford, who has had oversight of Nice, has been involved in this one as well. He's got gardening leave at the moment from City. We don't know exactly how long that is, but the suggestion is that it'll be summertime. You know, technically not supposed to be working in that time,
no.
but we know how these things work in football. I think they would like him to be involved in the selection of a sporting director, because what's the point of appointing a sporting director that's going to work with the chief executive who is football focused? You know, he has done deals such as the Erling Haaland one, other stuff in terms of the academy. What's the point of appointing a sporting director and then giving him to a chief executive and saying, here you go, you've got to work with this guy? The idea, I think, is to start from the top and work their way down.
Is there any names out there being bandied about inside the club or amongst your peers about who is going to be the sporting director? Who do you see as like favourite?
Lots of names, isn't there?
Oh,
I mean,
right.
yeah. I mean, there's Dan Ashworth at Newcastle.
Yeah.
He's somebody that Dave Brailsford knows well from their time together at the FA. So Brailsford was part of a technical team that was kind of advising on the FA's structure in 2016. Dan Ashworth was at the FA at that time. But that being said, the information that we have is that Ashworth is giving people the impression that he's going to stay at Newcastle. Now, that's just, that's one sort of aspect to it. You don't know if that's absolutely going to happen. Julian Ward's another name that we've heard. He was at Liverpool under Michael Edwards and then got promoted to sporting director at Liverpool when Michael Edwards left, but he only sort of stuck in the job for about 7 months. I think ultimately he left. It wasn't really for him, that environment. So I think that's somebody that United have looked at, or INEOS in particular. And there's others. I mean, there's Andrea Berta, Atletico Madrid. You could perhaps mention Marco Nepper at Bayern Munich. There's quite a lot of names that are floating around. And I think, INEOS have shown already that they've got intention to try and appoint people, that they think are the best people for the job.
Best in class.
Best in class is the idea. So we will see in time whether that's actually the case. But I think appointing someone like Barada is a bit of a statement to say we do mean business.
Where does that leave John Murtough? Lots of people have made comments for a long time on this channel about John Murtough, that he's got no qualifications for the jobs and that he's come through United over a long period of time and he's jumped other people who have had the qualifications. Is there a role when United are looking for a sporting director for John Murtough in this new change, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, his sort of rise has been really interesting, I think, and something that we touched on in a piece before Christmas. And as you've touched on, I think his relationship with Ed Woodward was very beneficial in that regard. He came in at a time when Ed Woodward was the chief executive, had just started under David Moyes. David Moyes knew him at Everton and brought him in to assist on all manner of things, including like logistics and things like that. And he realised that Ed Woodward was perhaps, struggling with some of the just assistance, really. And getting close to him, I think that helped sort of make him have a good sort of sense of importance at United and influence. And then it gradually, grew and grew. And, he was involved in the academy restructuring in terms of the recruitment restructuring as well. And he's then got to be football director of Manchester United. Inter Miami were offering him a job at that point, and United didn't want to lose him, so Ed Woodward gave him the job as football director. I mean, you can definitely criticise aspects of what he's done. He is someone that will feel that he can still offer stuff for United. So he's not somebody that only wants to be a football director, and if anybody comes in other than him, he'll go, right, I'm off, thank you very much. He will sort of say that actually I know a lot about Carrington and the structure, and I learn a lot about the regulations in football, and I can be of assistance in some way. So I don't think he will see someone coming in as a sporting director above him, because that's what it would be as terminal to his role. But we'll see ultimately. I mean, INEOS will have the final say, and I think Dave Brailsford will be very important in that.
You talk about John Murtough there and his capabilities in that. Well, I read what you put down in The Athletic about John Murtough. An extraordinary bit of writing, to be honest with you, about Sir Alex Ferguson being blanked with Jude Bellingham at Carrington. It was an extraordinary story. Just fill us in on what you've said and how you see that as like a positive or a negative for John Murtough.
It's a really interesting story, actually, because and it's one that's been said to me by several people. There's some dispute over exactly what happened, because as ever with all these stories, you want to give people the opportunity to respond. So the story that I got told was that when Jude Bellingham came for a visit of Carrington 2020, before he'd moved to Dortmund, so this is when he was a Birmingham City player with his parents, United realised what a talent this guy was. People inside the building were thinking he's a future £100 million player, which then proved to be the case.
Yeah.
At this time, he was, it was a lot of money for a 17-year-old, but still they thought they could get him and was worth the money, something like 25, 30. It was to be determined with Birmingham. And clearly he'd felt that Dortmund was a good next step for him because of what had happened with Jadon Sancho and Erling Haaland, the opportunities that you get as a young player in Germany. But United still felt we could have a chance if we showed him that we do play young players in the first team. There's opportunities for you there. So as part of that, they thought, right, we'll get Sir Alex Ferguson involved. They drove in, and the idea is that, perhaps Sir Alex speaks to him for a little bit and talks to him about the, academy, that he oversaw and the kind of the number of players that he gave opportunities to.
The history,
exactly. Just that kind of stuff that only someone like him can actually produce. It's magic, really. Now, some people might say that actually that was then. This is now. He retired from being manager at United in 2013. This is 7 years later. And is that relevant to a young kid, 17-year-old, in this day and age? Although that being said, his dad, was a striker, non-league striker of some serious repute in his day. So they kind of thought, okay, that might chime a little bit more with him. But I personally think that if you've got Sir Alex available, use him. He's got more. He's forgotten more than anybody would ever know about football and management. So
Sir Alex is relevant.
Yeah.
When you talk about introducing young kids, he's done it all. He knows everybody's father, mother, everything.
Yeah.
He is relevant into seducing, as some people would say, of like selling the idea. And John Murtough, according to the story, didn't use him. That was a bit of a kick in the teeth. A lot of people have commented on that.
Yeah. The story that I've been told, by numerous people is that they were having a kind of a chat in the room, and John Murtough interrupted the meeting and then sort of led Jude Bellingham and his parents away. People that know John Murtough say that is not what happened, or a misunderstanding. He didn't interrupt any meeting, and that meeting came to an end of its own accord. So, listen, it's difficult to know exactly what happened. I wasn't there, but enough people have told me that the first version that I would. I would lean towards that. But whatever happened, I think Sir Alex Ferguson definitely felt that he had been interrupted, and so there was an issue there.
Yeah, and there might be an issue with that going forward. But we'll wait and see. Now, I've still got a few more things for you, Laurie. So you have been away for a while.
Keep them coming, Tony.
Yeah, it's called overtime. Yeah, that's what it is. You've got overtime.
Well, listen, I owe you back for all those times. You looked after
big
me
time
away matches. So
yeah. Listen, let's go back in time. Ralf Rangnick appointed here at United. Sounded as though like he was going to be in charge of certain different things in that. Who was the primary mover in getting rid of everything what was promised for Ralf Rangnick?
It's a complex situation, that, just because. So I think primarily, United need an interim manager because they didn't want to start a managerial search mid-season for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They had no plans to sack Solskjaer until they did. It's always the case, I suppose. But and getting a manager of any repute for that interim period is difficult because what manager's going to say, yes, I'll sign up to that. So Ralf Rangnick was the guy. He'd had a previous relationship with John Murtough, who was fresh into his role as football director at this point, a few months. So that was the one that they kind of pursued. There were other alternatives, but Rangnick was the one they kind of honed in on. And then, but he had a job already at Lokomotiv Moscow. He was a kind of consultancy, but it was a long-term job there. So United, to make it worth his while, sort of added on this aspect of a sporting director role, and so that was part of it. I think also to do with money, finances. It's another way of extending the payment terms. And listen, they could always go to it at the end of it and say, well, okay, it's working for us, it's maybe not working for us, or it's working for you or not. The way the season ended up going, with the results and with him being unable, as he felt, to fully give himself to the club in the way that he had envisaged. In the January transfer window, they didn't sign anyone, obviously. No. They pulled up the drawbridge on that. He was quite public in saying what he felt should have happened.
Too public,
yeah. People were wincing at some of the stuff that he was saying behind the scenes because they felt that some of it was private conversations that was then made public. He probably felt, well, actually, this is just me being honest, and this is what the club needs, a bit of honesty. And we're seeing that now, really, with Brailsford and Ratcliffe coming in. being very honest in their first statement, to the staff, for example, saying this club has been underperforming on a football level. That's kind of what Rangnick was saying, really. But it's a different thing, I think, if you've got a manager and you're the public face at press conferences week after week saying it. It's kind of like you're kicking them whilst you're there. It's a difficult one. And then ultimately, when it came to it, I think he knew he wasn't going to continue in that role. I think he was fine to sort of say, thanks very much, and we'll come to an agreement and I'll leave. United, I think very early on, realised that it wasn't going to continue beyond the end of the season. And Erik ten Hag was in, and if you've got a manager that's been there already, sort of still around as the sporting director, in some kind of capacity, I think that maybe is a little bit of an unexpected situation. So I don't think ten Hag was, I don't think he wanted Ralf Rangnick to stay particularly.
Yeah, we all heard the story. Belfast, Marcus Rashford. Let us know how you got this story, because it is an absolute cracker, Laurie.
Well, obviously it was all over social media, wasn't it? And so I think people were, when ten Hag had said in the press conference, actually I was in the press conference and we kind of forgot to ask about outs and doubts. And it was only when the MUTV comments had come out later that we realised, Rashford's ill. And so that's when I think a lot of people on social media in Belfast started posting saying, well, he was out on Thursday night in Belfast. So, maybe there's a 2 + 2 = 4 on this occasion. And but the initial response from United was that it was the Wednesday night that he was out, so which is fine, because they had Thursday off, rest day, and then Friday morning training, and he became ill in the intervening period. Now I'm not out there to kind of catch people out. I've had nights out. You're allowed to have a bit of relaxing time. Certainly footballers are. He's a 26-year-old guy. I've seen the stuff from Roy Keane and Gary Neville on the overlap, if I'm allowed to mention another YouTube outfit. But
Gary's our friend.
Gary's your friend, exactly. And they were kind of defending. They the treble winners, for example, went out boozing in the 10 days.
I don't understand that. Just like you don't.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know anything about a night out, do you, Tone? So we're not trying to castigate anybody, but I think when it then impacts your ability to perform, do your job, train on a Friday.
That's right.
And also if there's a kind of a little bit of a falsehood being put out there, then I think it's fair enough to kind of just look into that and just try and establish what the truth is. So I was getting stuff sent to me anyway. It wasn't like I was particularly pursuing it.
You're the man. That's why
people were saying, listen, by the way. I've got to give credit to Dan Sheldon and Mark Critchley, colleagues of mine. They were the ones that got it kind of over line, and Mark Critchley in particular got basically a piece of evidence, that original video with a timestamp on it, so exactly when it was taken and what was happening. So this was like midnight, sort of Thursday night, Friday morning in Belfast. So
was that going in or coming out?
That was allegedly going into the club. And obviously we've seen subsequently, I think the waitress in Belfast sort of giving an account which hasn't been challenged, I don't think. Ten Hag dealt with it. He basically dropped him for the Newport game, really, because Rashford had put his hand up and said, actually, I can come down, I can play.
That's right. Yeah.
But they had already left on the Saturday, the team, to go down. So it would have been a bit of an awkward one. But Ten Hag said no. But then he started him the very next game against Wolves and he's performed. So you go, right, he's done well there. Management, he's drawn a line. And the difference with him and Jadon Sancho was on the Monday when he came in, Rashford, he took responsibility, he owned up to it. And so I think Ten Hag, in that sense, is, okay, there's no point, extending this any further. But obviously the questions then are, okay, why would you go out? Is there anything else going on? We've seen his form this season. So there's a little bit of concern there, a little bit of, kind of paternal instinct kicks in and you kind of want them to be fulfilling their role to the best of their abilities. So, whether it's part of something wider, I don't know. That's something that you perhaps want to ask questions on as a journalist, but this particular incident, I think, is line drawn under it and moved on.
You as a United fan, you as a journalist, and lots of people out there, and it's Mason Greenwood. What's the situation? Is he going to be still a United player? Is the rumours true out there that there is people like Barcelona and that actually looking at him?
I think they're true, yeah. I think Spanish clubs in particular are looking at him because they've seen how well he's done at Getafe and the kind of way he's been able to be reintegrated into football. And are thinking, well, okay, if it's worked there, it can work for us. His talent's never been in question. I mean, I know there were dips at times in his performances, but his ability as a footballer is, freakish, really. And he scored to be out for 20 months and go and score the goals that he has done. Is kind of remarkable. United, the situation was that they said he would. The expectation was he wasn't going to play for them again when they made that decision ultimately. Richard Arnold, though, was the chief executive at that time, putting his name to that Does that change now that INEOS are involved? I don't know. I've not asked the question most recently on it. I would anticipate that it still would not change, and this summer will be the one where they look to sell him. And yeah, I mean, I guess that loan has then worked because it's created a bit of a market for them.
Sorry, just before we go, the Richard Arnold scenario with Mason Greenwood, how did you see that going? Because a lot of fans were unhappy that it appeared as though he'd changed his mind. In other words, he was staying at Man United and then he was looking for ways out, like saying, I'm waiting for the women's football team. How did you see that story go? Do you think it was like erratic, not the done thing?
Yeah, it was awkward really, because they should have made a call early and gone with it, and stuck with it. It's this classic sort of inertia that grips the club with the Glazers in charge, because it's people sort of second guessing themselves a little bit. There's a delay in getting feedback, which I do genuinely think will change with INEOS. I think Ratcliffe, we've seen him. He was here for the Munich Memorial. He's been very present. So the idea, people feel energised that they're going to get a direct response to questions that they've got more immediately. So the Greenwood thing kind of dragged on. Yeah, they just handled it really badly. And it was Adam Crafton's reporting that exposed really that they were going to intended to keep him and try and start the process for that, and then they realised the public backlash would just not sort of countenance that, and they realised that actually was a big factor in all this, and they had to pay heed to it. But yeah, it was an awkward episode, totally.
Yeah, I don't want to preempt a story you're doing, and I know you're writing it, and you're still having discussions about the ground, new ground, the Wembley of the North, and all that. But one thing I'll ask you on the details, what are coming out on it. Public money. Does that sit right with you? As a United fan and as a reporter, public money, will that be acceptable, Laurie?
I mean, we'll have to look at it. I mean, it's very clearly very early stages, isn't it?
Yeah.
And but yeah, certainly the rhetoric from Ratcliffe has been that he wants to, he's definitely open to transforming this area in a way that hasn't been envisaged before. I mean, obviously this place, Hotel Football, you saw the untapped potential, in land just outside Old Trafford, and went with it. Not being harsh on you, but the Glazers could have thought of that, couldn't they? If they'd had the sort of nous, back in the day. So that's something that Ratcliffe wants to, I think, address. But as you say, it's one that's going to cause debate, because you've got, Ratcliffe is domiciled in Monaco, so in terms of UK tax, that's relevant.
It's called tax avoidance.
Okay.
In my language,
okay.
Anyway.
I'll let you say that.
It's called tax avoidance in my language.
I'm not sure what the correct terminology is.
Yeah. Hiding it.
Right, okay. But that being said, they will argue that if they transform the area to a significant degree, then it produces jobs for the community. It raises the economy in the local area. So shouldn't the government want to help that kind of regeneration take place?
A government development fund.
Yeah. You've seen it with other places. I mean, City. For example.
City. Yeah.
I think London Stadium had a bit of government money as well. I mean, look at Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Glazers, definitely got the local community to fund that.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off short there, but this isn't something we're going to see in the next 2 or 3 years. Surely, this is right down the line, because the priority for INEOS and Sir Jim Ratcliffe is the footballing strategy of sides. They've got to get that right, and that in itself is a money pit. Yeah.
Well, hugely. I mean, you look at, that's the reason why United didn't spend any money in January, because the financial fair play, the PSR, the profit and sustainability rules, whichever format you want to grill into, they are tight on it, so they don't want to, risk more money at the cost of then falling foul of those rules, which the Premier League have shown that they do have teeth on, with the points deduction for Everton and then bringing charges against Forest and Everton again. But that is just something that shouldn't really happen when you're at United. I mean, they've got a lot of money. They shouldn't be making losses. They should
make sense, does it?
They should be selling academy players for good money. I know it's easy for City because they're winning stuff and therefore the value goes up. But they still, I think, could be better at that, and then buying players at the right points and for good value. So getting that right will then help them adhere to the rules.
Well, let's hope it does. I've just remembered, Laurie. Sorry. Listen, it's been nearly 2 years since you've been here, so I've got a few things to say. Yeah. Listen, the summer strategy, transfers, the ins and outs and that. How do you see that?
I think that I mean, certainly INEOS will want to make changes, won't they? I think quite a few players are coming towards the end. I mean, you look at Anthony Martial, he'll be available on a free. Rafael Varane could be a free as well if United don't trigger that extension. Who else is there? I mean, Donny van der Beek's on loan at the moment. It's not going great at Frankfurt already.
I wouldn't say it's not going great. It's absolutely abysmal from a fan's point of view. Looking at that, what he's done there, you've got to feel sorry for him. It's just not happened at all. So there's no value coming back for Donny van der Beek.
This is the issue. So how much value really is in the squad? Jadon Sancho is probably one where, I mean, he'll definitely go if Erik ten Hag is still here. And I do think even if he isn't, you know what I mean? I think INEOS will look at that situation and think he's not the kind of person we want to build a team around, just given the issues that United have had with him. And so depending on how his loan goes at Dortmund, he should have some value. You know, he's got a contract that runs for another few years. So
Harry Maguire, value for him. He's got the Euros, does well there.
Well, it's an interesting one with him because obviously, I mean, United did agree a fee with West Ham last summer, 30 million, something like that. So that's actually not a bad. I mean, I know they bought him for 80 million, but they've had a few years out of him, and then he's 30 for a centre back as well. I wonder if though, I mean, he's got a year less on his contract now. He's obviously a year older in this summer, so whether they actually look at it and think, to be fair, if he's okay with sort of this squad rotation aspect that he's got, and he's played probably more than he expected with the injuries. And you can't, Varane, does get injuries. Martinez has got another injury, which is such a shame. Which is not, that's not a muscle injury, so it's just a freak one. But it's not like Maguire's looking at it thinking, I'm never going to get an opportunity. He's going to have another run probably now. So I wonder if they look at that and just think, okay, let's keep it going. He's a good guy to have around the place. It'd be up to him, I suppose, if he wants to get a first team regular position at another club or not.
Last one, Laurie. Anthony, big price tag. Is it affecting him, or is he just not good enough? What's the word inside United? Are they sticking with him? Are they looking to offload him?
Yeah, I think if he'd come in for 25 million or something, we wouldn't really be having a conversation. It'd be actually he's committed, he tries hard, and occasionally produces a moment of quality. Obviously, for 86 million though, you're looking at him being able to beat players either way, score regularly, assist regularly. I mean, for him to have got 1 goal and 1 assist all season, and that being at Newport is really
as
poor
as poor can be.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose he could have 0 and 0, but no, 1 and 1 is pretty bad. I just think that again, it's going to be difficult to if they do take the decision, let's sell him. It's difficult to get a market where you're thinking, okay, we've got. And they're not going to get anywhere close to 86 million in value now, and he's young enough, so they might again just think if he's acceptable if he doesn't mind being in and out, try again.
I mean, we all know his off-field antics, what went on, the discussions there, the disruption. So basically, try again. Just a bad year. Is that how you look at it, Laurie?
I mean, his first year, it wasn't. He produced some really good moments, didn't he? Barcelona. I'm trying to think of others. There was quite a few where he cut in and scored goals. Hasn't happened for him this season. Maybe with a fresh outlook, it will be better. Yeah.
Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure, Laurie. It's been nearly 2 years since Laurie's been on the channel. Let us know if you want him back before the next 2 years. Listen, smash that like button. Get your comments in. Absolutely delightful having you, Laurie. Thank you very much, my mate. Thank you.